In the quiet of space, far from Earth's reach, a strange signal suddenly echoed across the galaxy. It was a distress call, one that seemed to come from a race humanity had never encountered before. The message was brief, strange, and mixed with an odd urgency. It traveled across the stars, finally reaching Earth after what seemed like an eternity. Jake Trevor sat at the controls of his ship, the Nebula Star, his eyes scanning the data screen. The hum of the engine was the only sound that filled the cabin, a soft, constant reminder of the loneliness that came with his line of work. Once a soldier in Earth's elite forces, Jake had left that life behind when the war ended, choosing the solitude of space to escape the memories that haunted him. A crackling noise suddenly interrupted the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of a transmission. Jake's fingers paused above the console, his instincts immediately alerting him that something was different. He tapped a few buttons, rerouting the signal. The message was odd, a language that wasn't quite right, but through the static, Jake could make out the words that chilled him to his core. Human, own my pure body. His heart skipped a beat. The words weren't exactly clear, but the urgency was unmistakable. The voice that followed was soft, feminine, and full of desperation. Whoever it was, they were in danger, and the plea was meant for a human, someone from Earth. Jake couldn't understand why, but it sent a shiver down his spine. The message seemed impossible to ignore. He sat back in his chair, chewing over the words. "Own my pure body." He muttered to himself, confused and uneasy. It didn't make sense. Why would anyone, let alone an alien, ask for something like that? The message didn't come from any known species in the galaxy, and the coordinates given pointed to a distant planet in a sector that Earth had never explored. It was uncharted space, a place where no human had ever set foot. Jake leaned forward and studied the map of stars in front of him. His eyes lingered on the coordinates. Drix, a name that had no meaning to him. Yet something about it felt important, almost as if the message was meant specifically for him. He checked the timing of the transmission, and it seemed fresh, only a few hours old. Someone out there was still waiting for help, someone who had no one else to turn to. His mind raced with questions. Was it a trap? A trick by an enemy? Or was this something far more serious? He could think of 100 reasons not to go. Dangers unknown. The risk of being caught in a galactic conflict, or worse, being lured into a trap. But something about the voice in that transmission called to him. Maybe it was his experience as a soldier, always trained to help others in danger, or maybe it was just his sense of curiosity. But Jake knew he had to investigate. With a decisive swipe, he set a course for Drix. The Nebula Star roared to life, its engines propelling him faster toward the unknown. The journey to Drix was long and tense. As the ship crossed the stars, Jake couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. The transmission was haunting, and it clung to his thoughts, especially the words that seemed so out of place. "Own my pure body." It was hard to imagine a situation where such a phrase would make sense. Was it a cry for help, a demand, or something else entirely? The days passed slowly, and Jake found himself wondering about the alien who had sent the message. The voice had been faint, but there had been an undeniable quality to it, something regal, something powerful. It wasn't the voice of someone weak or begging. It was the voice of someone who had seen too much and was now desperately reaching out. But who was she? And why was she asking for a human to help? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake's ship broke through the planet's atmosphere. The view of Drix was breathtaking, a vibrant world full of thick jungles, glowing rivers, and towering mountains that stretched far into the horizon. The planet was both beautiful and eerie, like a land untouched by time. There was something strange in the air, something Jake couldn't quite place. He scanned the planet's surface for signs of life, but found only silence. As he navigated his ship toward the coordinates given in the transmission, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. What would he find when he landed? What kind of danger was waiting for him on this strange alien world? His thoughts were interrupted as a new transmission came through, this one stronger, clearer than before. The voice he had heard earlier echoed through the comm system, but now it was more urgent, more direct. "Human," the voice said, "you are the only one who can save me. Please, I beg you." Jake's hands tightened around the controls. The message was clear now, the plea unmistakable. Whatever was happening on Drix, it was bigger than anything he had imagined, and he was the only one who could help. With no more hesitation, Jake landed his ship on the surface of the alien world. Setting foot on the strange land that was about to change everything. The mysteries of Drix awaited, and with them, the alien princess who had called out to him. Jake stepped off the nebula star and onto the soft, glowing soil of Drix, the planet's atmosphere thick with the scent of strange, alien plants. The air felt different here, alive in a way that Earth's atmosphere never had. It was as if the planet itself was breathing, pulsing with energy. He stood still for a moment, taking in his surroundings. Massive trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting and turning in ways that defied natural logic. Some of the trees seemed to glow faintly, their leaves shimmering in the dim light of the distant sun. The sky was a swirl of colors, purples, oranges, and blues, and a strange sense of wonder filled Jake's chest. Despite the beauty, something felt off. The strange transmission still echoed in his mind, and the words, "Human, own my pure body," played over and over. What kind of plea was this, and why was it coming from this unknown planet? Jake was used to danger, but this was something new. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but he had come this far. There was no turning back now. As he moved through the lush landscape, Jake kept his hand close to the sidearm at his hip. The unknown was dangerous, and he had to be ready. But the deeper he went, the more peaceful the surroundings became. The jungle slowly opened up into a clearing, and at the far end of the space, Jake saw what he had been searching for, a palace. It was a sight to behold. The structure was massive, built into the side of a mountain, its walls a combination of smooth stone and glowing, crystal-like material. The palace seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and Jake couldn't help but feel that it was the heart of the planet itself. The sheer scale of the place made it clear that whoever lived here was powerful, someone important. A group of figures stepped out from the entrance of the palace. They were tall, their bodies slender and ethereal. Their skin shimmered with a soft glow, and their eyes, bright and piercing, seemed to look straight through Jake, as if they could read his every thought. They weren't human. These were the Alyans, the species that had sent the distress signal. Jake couldn't help but stare at them, mesmerized by their beauty and their alien features. Their bodies were almost too perfect to be real, like something out of a dream. They moved with a grace that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. One of them stepped forward, their voice smooth, almost melodic, as they spoke in a language Jake couldn't understand. They raised a hand, and the others fell silent. Then, in perfect English, the figure said, "You are the one who has come, the one we hoped would answer." Jake straightened, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. "I'm here," he said cautiously. "Where is the one who sent the message?" The figure nodded, motioning for him to follow. Without a word, Jake followed the Alyans into the palace. The interior was just as breathtaking as the outside, with towering pillars, walls of glowing crystal, and floors that seemed to shimmer like water. The air was thick with a kind of quiet power, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the entire place was alive, aware of his presence. They led him down a long hallway, and at the end of it, in a grand chamber, he saw her. The Alyan princess. She stood in the center of the room, bathed in soft light, her long, silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. Her eyes were like pools of deep violet, intense yet beautiful, holding a strength that Jake could feel even from a distance. She wore robes of shimmering fabric that seemed to shift with every movement, her presence commanding and regal. But it wasn't just her beauty that took Jake's breath away. It was the sadness that lingered in her eyes. Despite her otherworldly beauty, there was a heaviness about her, as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. And there was something else too, something that made Jake uneasy. A quiet desperation. As Jake entered the chamber, the princess turned her gaze to him. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room held its breath. "You came," she said, her voice soft yet strong. "I didn't believe anyone would, but you came." There was a flicker of hope in her words, a flicker that made Jake's heart race. "I got your message," he replied. "I don't know what's going on here, but I'm here to help. You said, 'Own my pure body.'" He stopped himself, unsure of how to continue. The phrase still made no sense to him, but the urgency in her plea was enough to push him forward. The princess looked down, her expression troubled. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked up again, and Jake could see the weight of what she was about to say. "It's not just a message. It's a cry for help," she said slowly, as if she were gathering the strength to speak. "I have been cursed, bound by forces greater than me, forces within my own people." Her voice trembled as she continued. "The curse has been placed on me to destroy my very essence, to break me." Jake frowned, taking a step closer. "Cursed?" The princess nodded. "My people, the Alyans, were once a powerful race, connected to the very energy that gives life to this planet. But we've been corrupted. A faction within my own court has stolen my purity. They believe that by breaking me, they can control our power. I am the last of my kind, and they will stop at nothing to see me fall." Jake felt a surge of compassion for her. She wasn't just a beautiful alien princess. She was someone fighting to survive. And somehow, her fate was tied to his. "I don't know how to help you," Jake said, feeling unsure. "You can," she replied, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "You, human, are the only one who can." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Jake didn't understand how or why, but one thing was clear. This was a fight he couldn't turn his back on. He had no idea what he was about to face, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The Illyrian princess, Valiana, led Jake through the palace with a sense of urgency. Her graceful steps were steady, but Jake could see the tension in her posture. She was afraid, but she was also determined. They moved through the corridors, passing by rooms filled with strange artifacts, each one a piece of Illyrian history. The palace, once a symbol of power and purity, now felt like a prison, its walls heavy with secrets. Finally, they arrived at a large chamber deep within the heart of the palace. The room was surrounded by glowing crystals, the light casting long shadows across the floor. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, its surface smooth and made of a stone that seemed to pulse with energy. Valiana gestured for Jake to step forward, and as he did, he felt the air in the room grow colder. "This is where it began," she said, her voice quiet but filled with pain. "This is where the curse was placed upon me." Jake looked at her, confusion still written across his face. "A curse? What do you mean? How does this work?" Valiana turned to face him, her violet eyes meeting his with a mixture of sadness and hope. "It is not a simple curse, Jake. It is a binding, an ancient magic created by my people to control us. But my curse is different. It was designed to break me from the inside, to drain me of everything that makes me Illyrian." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the altar. "My people have always been connected to the energy of this planet. We are its stewards, its protectors. Our powers come from the earth itself. Its life force flows through us. But there are those among us who believe that the only way to ensure our race's survival is to control that power, to break our connection to the planet. And to do that, they must destroy me." Jake's heart began to race as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Destroy you? But you're the princess. You're supposed to be the leader of your people. How could anyone want that? Valiana's expression darkened. Not everyone sees me as a leader. My cousin, Arthor, is the one behind this. He is one of the most powerful members of my court, and he has manipulated the others into believing that the only way to save the Alyans is to sever the connection between our kind and the planet. He believes that by breaking me, he will gain control of our powers. And when he does, he will be unstoppable. Jake frowned. And you said only a human could help you. Valiana nodded, her gaze turning inward. Yes, the curse that was placed upon me is tied to my very essence, my connection to the Alyrian energy. The magic is too strong for even our most powerful healers to break. But the human touch, it is different. You, Jake, are immune to the magic that binds me. Only a human can sever the connection that holds me prisoner. Jake shook his head. I still don't understand. How could I, a human, do something that your people can't? Valiana's lips curled into a faint, sad smile. It is because your kind is unlike any other. Humans are unpredictable, resilient in ways we cannot fathom. The Alyrians have always relied on logic and power. But humans, you act on instinct, on emotion. Your spirit is what makes you different, and that is why you are the only one who can save me. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. He had never thought of himself as special. He was just a soldier, someone who had done his duty and lived through the worst of it. But Valiana's words made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. But the task ahead was still unclear. He didn't know how he could possibly break a curse as powerful as the one Valiana described. His mind raced with questions, but before he could voice them, Valiana spoke again. There is a ritual, she said, her voice soft, but filled with certainty. The only way to break the curse is through a ritual of rebirth. It is an ancient ceremony, one that was used long ago by the first Illyrian rulers. It is said that the ceremony can cleanse the body, purify the soul, and sever any magical bond. But there is a price to pay. The ritual is not easy, and it requires a great deal of energy. Jake stepped closer. What kind of energy? Valiana met his gaze, her eyes locking onto his. Your energy, Jake. The energy of a human. Jake's heart skipped a beat. You want me to give you my energy? How? Valiana's eyes softened, and she reached out, her fingers grazing his arm gently. It is not as simple as just giving energy. The ritual requires a bond between us, a shared connection of mind and body. You will need to link with me, to enter my consciousness and share in my pain. Only through that connection will the curse be broken. Jake felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The idea of linking his mind with hers, of feeling her pain. He didn't know if he was ready for that. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw the desperation there. She was willing to sacrifice everything to save her people. He couldn't turn his back on her now. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. And if we fail, what happens? Valiana's expression grew somber. If we fail, the curse will be permanent. I will lose my connection to the planet. My people will fall into darkness, and the power that sustains us will fade away. And I will be lost, Jake, forever. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. Jake knew the risks were high, but he also knew that he couldn't leave her to face this alone. He had already come this far. Now, there was no turning back. I'm with you, he said quietly. We'll do this together. Valiana's face softened with relief, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, a hope that he had the power to help her. The ritual was about to begin. The chamber grew darker as Jake and Valiana prepared for the ritual. The air was thick with tension, the soft hum of energy vibrating through the walls of the palace. Valiana had explained the ritual briefly, but Jake still wasn't sure what to expect. The Illyrian magic was unlike anything he had ever encountered before, and the connection they needed to form seemed impossible. Valiana had asked him to stand before the altar, a place where Illyrian royalty had once performed sacred ceremonies. Now it would be the setting for the most important act of her life. She stood opposite him, her silver hair cascading down her back, her eyes steady but filled with quiet determination. Her soft robes shimmered, the colors shifting with the movement of the air around her. "This is the place where the ritual begins," Valiana said softly, her voice low and full of reverence. She stepped toward him slowly, her presence calming yet powerful. "We must both be ready. The connection between us will be intense, and you must trust me completely. Only then will we have a chance." Jake nodded, trying to steady his breathing. His mind was filled with doubt, fear, and the weight of what he was about to do. He wasn't a healer, nor was he a mystic. He was a soldier, trained for battle, not for magic or ancient rituals. But there was no turning back now. Valiana needed him, and he had promised to help. Valiana raised her hands, and the air in the room seemed to shift. The glowing crystals embedded in the walls of the chamber began to flicker, their light pulsing as if responding to her power. Slowly, she began to speak in the language of her people, a soft chant that resonated in the air, sending waves of energy through the room. Jake could feel it, like an electric current running through the space, his skin tingling with the unfamiliar power. "Close your eyes," Valiana instructed. "Let the energy flow through you. Trust in the bond we share." Jake did as she asked, shutting his eyes tightly. He could hear her voice, steady and soothing, guiding him into a state of focus. The sound of her chanting filled his mind, and slowly he began to feel a strange connection forming between them. It wasn't physical, but it was as if their minds were touching, connected by an invisible thread. The more he focused, the stronger the pull between them became. He could feel her pain, sharp, overwhelming, as if a weight was pressing down on her chest. The curse was a heavy burden, and through the connection, Jake could sense the darkness that surrounded it. It was a suffocating force, one that threatened to tear her apart from the inside. His heart ached for her. But then, something shifted. Instead of just feeling her pain, Jake felt something else. Something warm, something pure. It was as though a light had begun to form deep within her, a light that was fighting against the darkness, pushing it back. The bond between them grew stronger, and Jake's own emotions seemed to mix with hers. Her strength was becoming his, and his determination was becoming hers. Suddenly, Jake was no longer standing in the chamber. His surroundings seemed to vanish, and in their place, he found himself in a vast, empty space. The ground beneath him was soft, like mist, and the air was filled with a strange, shimmering light. At the center of this place was Valiana, her figure glowing with a soft, ethereal radiance. "You've entered my mind, Jake," she said, her voice echoing in the strange, dreamlike space. "This is where we must face the curse. This is where the magic resides." Jake looked around, unsure of what to do. He was standing in a place that wasn't real, yet everything felt so vivid, so alive. Valiana's form shimmered before him, but her eyes were dark, filled with the weight of the curse. The magic that had trapped her for so long was everywhere, writhing in the air like a dark mist, swirling around her, trying to consume her. "Focus," Valiana said. "You must pull the darkness from me. It is inside of me, in my very soul. Only you can remove it." Jake felt a wave of doubt wash over him. How could he do that? He was just a man, not a powerful Illyrian. He didn't have the magic, the strength. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that gave him hope. There was a flicker of belief in her, a belief that he could do this. He took a deep breath and reached out. The moment his hand touched the air, the darkness recoiled, like a living thing, writhing and snapping away from him. It felt wrong, cold and jagged, but Jake pressed on. As he focused on the darkness, something inside of him shifted. The bond between him and Valiana grew stronger, and with it, he began to feel a surge of power. Not magic, but something deeper, something human. His hand began to glow, a warm, golden light that pushed against the darkness. As the light spread, Jake felt the pain in Valiana's mind begin to ease, the weight of the curse lifting. The darkness fought back, but the more Jake focused, the more the light spread. He could feel Valiana's presence, her strength, and it fueled his own determination. "You can do it," she whispered, her voice soft, full of trust. With a final push, Jake forced the darkness away, pulling it from Valiana's soul. It resisted, fought against him, but with one last effort, he broke through. The dark mist vanished, leaving only the warm glow of Valiana's essence, shining brightly in the center of the space. For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, Jake opened his eyes. The chamber was exactly as it had been before, but now, the air felt lighter, freer. Valiana stood before him, her eyes wide with amazement and relief. The curse was gone. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him. And for the first time, Jake saw her smile, not the sad, strained smile she had worn before, but a smile full of genuine gratitude. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." Jake's chest swelled with pride, but he knew that the real work was just beginning. The battle for Drix wasn't over, and there were still enemies to face. But in this moment, he had done what no one else could. He had freed Valiana, and in doing so, he had taken the first step towards saving her people. The chamber was quiet, save for the sound of Jake's steady breathing. Valiana stood before him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The dark magic that had once surrounded her was gone, replaced by an aura of soft, glowing light. The curse had been broken, but both of them knew that their victory was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Jake's head swam as he tried to process what had just happened. He had reached into the heart of Valiana's soul and torn the darkness away. It was beyond anything he could have imagined. He wasn't sure how he had done it, but the connection they shared had given him strength he didn't know he had. Valiana took a slow, deep breath, her body trembling with the aftereffects of the ritual. Her once somber expression had softened, and for the first time in a long while, she looked free. The weight that had crushed her for so long had been lifted. But even though the curse was gone, the consequences of what had happened still loomed over them both. "Jake," Valiana said softly, her voice still shaky. "You don't know what you've done. You've saved me. But now we must prepare for what comes next." Jake nodded, though he didn't fully understand. "What do you mean? Isn't the worst over? The curse is gone." Valiana's eyes darkened as she stepped closer to him. "The curse is gone, yes. But the power that was trying to control me hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting for another way to strike. Arthor, my cousin, won't give up so easily. He's dangerous, Jake. And now that he knows I've been freed, he will come for me with everything he has." Jake's jaw tightened. He had known that breaking the curse wouldn't solve everything, but hearing it from Valiana made the situation feel even more real. She wasn't just a princess trying to survive. She was a leader, and her life wasn't just her own. It was tied to the future of an entire species. "We need to prepare," Valiana continued. "Arthor will bring his forces. He's already gathered allies from outside the kingdom, mercenaries, warlords from other planets. He's planning an attack, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants." Jake could see the fire in her eyes. Valiana wasn't just afraid. She was ready to fight. "Then we'll fight him," Jake said, his voice firm. "Whatever it takes." Valiana looked at him for a long moment, her gaze softening. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't understand, Jake. Arthor is more powerful than you can imagine. He has the ability to control the minds of those around him, to twist their thoughts and make them believe anything. He's already turned many of my people against me. If we're going to stand a chance, we need more than just strength. We need allies, true allies." Jake looked at her, his mind racing. He had no idea where to start. He was just a human, alone on an alien planet, with no resources or army of his own. But he had fought for survival before. He had led men into battle and watched them fall. This was no different. "We'll find them," Jake said. "We'll find the allies you need." Valiana nodded, though her eyes remained troubled. "I hope so. But time is running out. Arthor won't wait forever. We need to act quickly." Without another word, she turned and led Jake out of the chamber, her steps quick and purposeful. They moved through the palace, passing by the glowing walls, which seemed less alive now, as if the energy in the air had shifted. The palace, once a symbol of power and greatness, now felt like a fortress under siege. Every corner seemed to hold danger, every shadow felt like it could conceal an enemy. Valiana led him into the war room, a large, circular chamber with maps of Drix and the surrounding planets spread out across the tables. A group of Illyrian generals were already gathered, their faces grim. When they saw Valiana enter, they stood, bowing low in respect. "Your Highness," one of them said, his voice filled with reverence. "We've been waiting for your orders." Valiana raised a hand, signaling for them to remain standing. "I know the situation is dire," she said, her voice strong now. "Arthor will attack soon. But I have an ally, a human warrior, who will stand by us in this fight. His name is Jake." The generals looked at Jake with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. They were Illyrians, and humans were nothing like them. They didn't have the same connection to the planet's energy, and they weren't trained in the same ways. But Valiana had chosen him, and her word was law. "This is Jake," Valiana repeated, her eyes locking onto each general in turn. "He is the one who freed me from the curse, and he will fight beside us." Jake felt the weight of their gazes on him. He wasn't used to being looked at like this. He was just a soldier. But here, among the Illyrian generals, he was something more. He had been given a responsibility, not just for Valiana's life, but for the future of her people. "I'm not here to take your place," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'm here to help. If you want me to lead, I will. But I don't need to be in charge. I just need to know what we need to do." Valiana nodded, her expression serious. "We need to prepare for battle. Arthor has already begun to mobilize his forces. We'll need to gather all the support we can from the surrounding planets. If we don't stop him now, it will be too late." Jake glanced at the maps spread across the table, studying the outlines of Drix and the neighboring worlds. It was a big task, bigger than anything he had ever faced before, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Then let's get to work," he said, his voice filled with determination. The battle for Drix had only just begun, and Jake knew that this fight would be like no other. But with Valiana by his side, and the Illyrian people rallying around them, he believed they might stand a chance. The stakes were high, but Jake had never backed down from a fight, and he wasn't about to start now. The war room buzzed with activity as Jake and Valiana stood at the center, surrounded by Illyrian generals, strategists, and advisors. The walls of the chamber, once calm and peaceful, now seemed alive with tension. Every map, every battle plan, every strategy that had been drawn on the table now felt crucial. One misstep, one mistake, and Drix could fall. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a general. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders, not give them. But this was different. Valiana had chosen him to fight alongside her, and the stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced before. Valiana stepped forward, her eyes scanning the table. "We must secure alliances. Arthor's forces are already on the move. If we don't act fast, he'll strike before we're ready." Jake glanced at the map. The planets around Drix, once neutral, were now looking like potential battlegrounds. Arthor had already made moves to gain support from mercenaries and warlords from neighboring systems. If those forces joined him, they would be a powerful threat. One of the Illyrian generals, A tall man with silver hair spoke up. "Your Highness, we have already sent emissaries to several of the neighboring planets, but our allies are few, and many are hesitant to get involved. They fear Arthor's growing influence. Fear is something we can no longer afford," Valiana said, her voice firm. "We need to show them that Drix is worth fighting for. We will not let Arthor control us." Jake looked at her, impressed by her resolve. She was not just a princess anymore. She was a leader, someone who was willing to risk everything to save her people. "We have to make them understand," Jake said, stepping forward. "I've seen what Arthor is capable of. He's ruthless, but he's not invincible. We can take him down, but we need their help." Valiana nodded. "Exactly. We must show the galaxy that we will not bend to tyranny. We will gather allies, and together we will defeat him." The room grew quiet as the generals and advisors exchanged glances. It was clear they were still uncertain, but Valiana's conviction was undeniable. "We need to move quickly," Jake said, trying to take charge. "The longer we wait, the stronger Arthor gets. We have to hit him fast, before he can strike first." Valiana gave him a brief nod. "Jake is right. Time is not on our side." The generals reluctantly agreed, and soon, plans were put into motion. The first step was to travel to the neighboring planets to form alliances. There were 3 key planets that could potentially provide support. Avalos, a peaceful planet known for its powerful fleet. Drix, a warlike world that had a history of mercenary forces. And Eldar, a technologically advanced planet that had trade agreements with the Alyans, but had always stayed neutral in times of conflict. Jake, along with a small team of Illyrian soldiers, would be sent to Avalos to convince their leaders to join the fight. Valiana would lead a diplomatic mission to Drix to negotiate with the warlords. Meanwhile, a small contingent would be sent to Eldar to secure their technological support. As the plans were made, the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew what was at stake, but Jake could also feel the growing sense of unity. The Illyrians had never fought alongside humans before, but now they had no choice. The curse had broken something within Valiana, something that gave her a new kind of strength, and that strength was spreading, even to the humans who had come to her aid. The mission to Avalos was set to depart first. Jake had mixed feelings about leaving the palace, but he knew it was necessary. He had never been to Avalos before, but he had heard stories of its great fleet. If they could convince the Avalosians to join the cause, their chances of victory would increase significantly. As Jake packed his gear, Valiana approached him in the quiet of the war room. Her expression was softer now, her usual royal demeanor replaced by something more vulnerable. "Jake," she said, her voice quiet, "I know this mission isn't going to be easy. Avalos is not a place where outsiders are easily trusted. But I believe in you. I know you'll do whatever it takes to make them see that we are not the enemy." Jake looked at her, a small smile crossing his face. "I won't let you down. I know what's at stake here. I'm with you, Valiana, all the way." She nodded, though her eyes were filled with something more, something deeper. Gratitude, maybe. Or perhaps it was the bond they had formed through the ritual. The connection they shared. Whatever it was, Jake felt it too. They were in this together, and they would face whatever came their way side by side. With a final glance toward the map of Drix and its surrounding planets, Jake walked out of the war room. His heart was pounding, but his resolve was clear. The battle was coming, and it was going to take everything they had to win. The flight to Avalos was long, and as they approached the planet's atmosphere, Jake could see the massive fleet waiting in orbit. Avalos wasn't just a peaceful world. It was a planet built on military might. Its fleet was one of the most advanced in the galaxy. If they agreed to join the fight, it would change the tide of the war. As the shuttle descended toward Avalos's capital city, Jake took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a mission to save Valiana. This was a mission to save an entire world. When the shuttle landed, they were greeted by the Avalosian military, armed, disciplined, and wary. Jake stepped forward, trying to look confident, though he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "We're here to speak with your leaders," Jake said, his voice steady. "About Arthor. About what's coming for all of us." The officer in charge of the Avalosian forces eyed him coldly. "We know who you are, human, and we know what you're here for. But the question is, why should we help you?" Jake straightened his back, meeting the officer's gaze. "Because if you don't, Arthor will destroy everything. And you won't be the last to fall." The Avalosian officer's gaze remained cold, his eyes narrowing as he sized Jake up. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their situation hanging heavy in the room. Jake could feel the skepticism radiating off the officer. The Avalosians were a proud people, used to standing alone, their military might unmatched in the galaxy. The idea of joining forces with outsiders, especially a human, was not something they would accept easily. "We don't take kindly to outsiders telling us how to fight our battles," the officer said, his voice sharp. "What makes you think we should risk everything for a planet we don't even know?" Jake stepped forward, his voice steady and confident. "Because Arthor isn't just going after Drix. He's planning to take over everything. Every planet, every system, every people. He's already working with mercenaries and warlords who have no loyalty to anyone but power. If you don't stand with us, Avalos will fall just like the rest of us. The war will come to your doorstep." The officer's eyes flickered, a brief moment of uncertainty passing through them, but he quickly masked it with a dismissive look. "Your words are bold, human, but bold words alone don't win wars." Jake clenched his fists, fighting the frustration that was building inside him. He knew the officer was right. Words alone wouldn't win this fight. But Jake wasn't just relying on words. He had something stronger: his actions, his loyalty, and his commitment to Valiana and the Illyrian people. "We can't do this alone," Jake said, his voice now softer, but filled with quiet conviction. "I've seen the power Arthor has. He controls minds, twists thoughts, manipulates people. I've seen it firsthand. He doesn't care about your planet, your people. He only cares about power. But together, we stand a chance." The officer studied Jake for a long moment, his face unreadable. The tension in the room stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, the officer turned to his subordinates, nodding slightly. The others around him exchanged glances but remained silent. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the officer spoke again. "You will have your audience with our council. But understand this, human. If you fail to convince them, we will not risk the lives of our people on a lost cause." Jake nodded, relieved but still cautious. "I understand. Thank you." They were escorted to a large hall within the heart of the Avalosian military compound. It was an imposing room, with high ceilings and walls lined with symbols of the planet's ancient history. At the far end of the hall sat the Council of Avalos, a group of older, seasoned leaders who oversaw the planet's military and political decisions. Jake could feel the weight of their gaze as he entered the room, his heart beating faster in his chest. He had come here for one reason: to convince them that Arthor's threat was real, and that together they had the strength to stop him. But he wasn't sure what would happen next. The Avalosian Council was known for its pragmatism. They wouldn't be swayed by emotion. They needed facts, strategy, and a clear path to victory. Valiana, standing beside him, looked calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. This wasn't just about politics for her. It was about her people, her family, and her future. Jake could sense her nervousness, though she masked it well. One of the council members, an older woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, spoke first. "You are asking us to risk the lives of our people, to align with a foreign planet in a war that we have no stake in. Why should we believe that your fight is ours, human?" Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. He couldn't afford to fail now. He had to make them see that their future was intertwined with Drix's. Because Arthor is a threat to everything you hold dear, Jake said, his voice unwavering. If you stay neutral, he will come for you. He's already making alliances with mercenaries and warlords. He will not stop until every planet under his control is fully subdued. You may think you're safe now, but you're not. The council members exchanged looks, their expressions hard to read. Jake could feel the weight of their decision hanging in the air. It wasn't just about military strength anymore. It was about choosing a side. And once they made their choice, there would be no going back. "We have our fleet," one of the male council members said, his voice calm but skeptical. "But we don't have the resources to wage a war on multiple fronts. Our people are not soldiers, and we are not in a position to fight a battle that isn't ours." Valiana spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "It is your battle, whether you believe it or not. Arthor's war will spread like a wildfire. If we don't stop him now, you will be next. Drix will not survive without your help, and the entire galaxy will suffer." Another council member, an older man with a white beard, looked directly at Valiana. His voice was softer than the others, as though he understood the gravity of her words. "You speak with conviction, Princess," he said, "and we know the stakes. But how can we trust that this human, and your people, can truly defeat Arthor? You say he controls minds. How do we fight against that?" Jake met the council member's gaze. "We don't fight him alone. We fight him together. The magic of the Illyrian people is powerful, but it must be combined with your strength, your technology, and your resolve. We don't need to fight the same way Arthor does. We need to outthink him, outmaneuver him." The room fell silent once more. The council members seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Finally, the older woman spoke again. "We will give you a chance, human," she said, her voice steady. "But we will not fight for you without proof that this war is real, that your cause is just, and that our people will benefit. You will have 48 hours to present your case to the people of Avalos. If you can convince them, we will lend our fleet to your cause. Fail, and we will remain neutral." Jake nodded, his heart pounding. He had been given a chance. Now it was up to him to make it count. As he and Valiana left the council chamber, he turned to her, his mind racing. "We have 2 days to prove this war is real," Jake said, his voice determined. "We'll make them see the truth. We can't afford to lose Avalos." Valiana's eyes met his, filled with both hope and resolve. "We won't lose. Not now." Together, they walked toward the future, where the fate of Drix and the entire galaxy would be decided.